Okay, welcome back to our series on how to get a job in game design. I forgot to note last time, if you have any questions, please, I will answer questions in previous videos. Stick them in those comments down there. Be polite, be nice. You can either ask in the comments or you can ask me on my Twitter. The link will also be in the description. Also, there's part 2 in a series, so there are a bunch of other videos, and there's a link to the playlist in the description as well. You can watch all the videos in order if you want to. And with that, let's get back to the video where we talk about the questions that I wish that people learning game design would ask me. Let's go. So before I get to the hiring process, because people often, they come to me and say, hey, how do I get a job as a game designer? And what I want to say is you're actually asking the wrong question a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time you're asking the wrong question. The question you should be asking is, how do I become a better designer? You have to have skills in both. And you shouldn't neglect one of those categories for the other. As an example, if you are a terrible designer, just theoretically, okay, but you have very, very good interviewing skills, well, that's going to come out in the interview, right? If it's a skilled interviewer, they're gonna determine, oh, this person doesn't have their skills up to the level of what we're looking for. And if you are an excellent designer and you have terrible interviewing skills, then the interviewer is going to have difficulty getting the information out of you that they need to get in order to demonstrate to the other people in the interview loop that you are the candidate to hire. So don't forget to also improve your design skills at every opportunity. So since we're talking about how to become a better designer, I'm going to give you a very broad and quick overview of what makes a good designer, in my opinion, okay? Because there are going to be a lot of different designers out there that have different ideas about what makes a good designer, but this is just what I'm looking for when I interview candidates. Okay? So we've already talked about what is game design. It's deciding what are the rules of the game. So how do you come up with those rules? The naive approach that a person might have when they try to think about how one would come up with the rules of the game is the stereotypical, TV game designer that you've seen in like shows or something like that. Wouldn't it be cool if like X happened in the game? Like the player can do X and there's like a big explosion. It's like an idea factory or idea generation view of game design. It's the wouldn't it be cool if school of game design. And that's not what game design is to me. It's totally possible to be an ideas-based game designer. And in fact, I would say that a lot of studios build very successful games using just that theory of game design. Like, hey, let's just think of the coolest stuff that the player can do and put all that in the game and ship that, right? And they just very much built their skill and honed their skill in doing that over a long period of time. And that's how they design games. And there are many multi-million dollar franchises where the primary designers are that kind of designer. And I respect it. And, ultimately there needs to be a coolness aspect of the game. Like you have to have some skill in that area of game design in order to be a successful game designer in the long term. But that's not the whole picture. And my feeling is that a lot of game designers miss the other side of game design that I'm about to talk about entirely. So this is a thing that I focus on, and it's the harder thing to train in a game designer than the wouldn't it be cool side of things. So I'm going to focus on this, and that is that game design for me is goal oriented. Okay, You want the player to feel or act or respond in a particular way. And so you create content or rules that evoke those feelings or actions or responses. That's what a game designer is. So I'll give you an example. Okay, you're the creative director or studio head or somebody comes up to you and they say, hey, we have a problem. Players, they play, a few times, a few days in a row, but then they drop the game and then they forget about the game. They don't come back for like a week or like a month or something like that. That's a problem. We want players to engage with our game more. So game design is the process that we're going to use to first identify this problem. I kind of skipped a step. Somebody had to identify the fact that that's a problem in the game. That's part of game design, is identifying that problem. And then second, determine a goal that will solve that problem. So the goal is, okay, let's develop something that will encourage the player to return to our game once per day. An example of that you might see is a first win of the day daily challenge. So you see this in a lot of games, like Overwatch and League of Legends and these sorts of games. They have, especially mobile games, have this a lot. The first time you log into a game, after the first time in the day, you either play a game or win a game, and then it gives you a bonus of some kind in the game. So we have a mechanic that we think will work towards this goal of solving the problem. The mechanic is first win of the day challenge to get the player to return once a day, which will prevent players from just playing a few times and then washing out and then never coming back, because they have an incentive to come back again to get that daily reward. So it's very easy as a designer to get to the end of this loop and then think, but wait, did the mechanic that I design actually accomplish the goal? And does the goal actually solve the problem? Those can be, especially as a beginning designer, those can be very difficult things to make sure that you're always getting right. So that, I think, is like, if you want to get better at design, think about those things. Think about what is the biggest problem with your game. What is your goal in solving that problem? What is the mechanic that you're going to design to accomplish the goal? And I love talking about this stuff. If you have a design you want me to critique, if you want to have a game that you want me to play or play test, I love doing that. I love mentoring. So you can go on to a website called ADP List, adplist.org. And the link to that will be, down somewhere over here. And you can schedule a mentoring session with me and do all that stuff. I love talking about designs of stuff. Great. Moving on. One last question that people often ask me before we get to the meat of things is, can I transition into design from another role? Is often asked by people who getting a junior design position is very difficult. So they think, maybe I can go into QA, or I have some engineering experience. Maybe I can do engineering, or maybe that. Some people are UX designers or UI artists, and they say, can I? And the answer is yes, but you have to be careful. Even QA is a very common story that people go into design from QA. I will tell you a story that one of the game designers that I respect the most made his way into design from QA. In fact, he was an engineer at like Boeing or something. And he just said, yep, I'm tired of Boeing. Don't want to do Boeing anymore. And he applied for a QA job. Like, he could easily, I'm pretty sure, have applied for an engineering job. But he said, no, I'm going to apply for a QA job because I'm like 100% sure of getting this job. And he worked his way to design from QA. So for QA in particular, the warning that I would give is that there are a lot of QA places that don't allow you the opportunity to interact directly with game designers. And so if you're going to transition from QA to design, then you need to find a studio where QA is embedded with design and interacts directly with design. It's probably a little bit harder to do, in this COVID age where people aren't in an office working, directly alongside each other. So it's just something to be mindful of. There are a lot of like outsourcing QA outlets where it's just a big building with only QA people. And I don't see that as working as strongly if your intention is to transition from QA to design, because you're just not going to be able to interact with the designers. So what you need to do if you want to move from role A to role B is step one, and this is maybe a little counterintuitive, but step one is to be good at role A. So let's say you're an engineer, and you go to the design manager and you say, and this is generally how you do it, you go to the design manager and you say, hey, I am interested in, in the long term, transitioning to design. And you just form a relationship with that design manager. You say, hey, can someone mentor me as a designer? Can I just like hang out with the design people sometimes, get to know them, and some design managers would be more or less amenable to this, but your job here is basically to be a people person, and form a relationship with them. So eventually that design manager is going to say to your current manager, hey, is this person good? And your current manager, I'll give you the example in my case. I was an engineer before I switched to design. So the design manager went to the engineering manager and they said, hey, is this person good? And the engineering manager said yes or no based on whether I was a good engineer, not whether I was a good designer. So if you want to move from engineering to design, you have to be a good engineer, not a good designer. So if you're going to move into a role in order to transition to design, a role that's not design, then you have to move it into that role with the intention that you might spend, even a few years in that role, and that you have to excel in that role before you can transition to design. And if you do have a skill that is, in any way, if you're a front-end engineer, or if you're I talk to a lot of UX designers because there are a lot of them on ADP list. I've worked with like one person was a video editing and that sort of thing. And my response to that is find a company that does both video games and the thing that you do, right? And then once you are in a company that does both, then you can start making connections. It's a lot easier to do the horizontal transfer than it is to do the vertical transfer from whatever you're doing directly into design. A lot of the times. Your situation is unique, obviously, so you have to figure out how that works for you. But once you're in a company that has both roles, then you can start like making your way through the org chart. Like say I'm the video editing. I go from like maybe that's like a marketing position, and then I changed from marketing team to the game team. And now that I'm on the game team, then I change to design, right? You can make these steps. This video is probably about long enough, and it's going to be a series. So next video, I will start getting into the meat of things, and we'll talk about resumes and the beginning of the hiring process and how all that works. And it will be a little bit less me talking out of camera. I actually intend to get my resume and an actual job posting and show you what I personally would do in order to apply for that job. So a little hands-on experience in the rest of the videos. So see you next time.